No, we're not.
Good evening, how's everyone doing? Welcome. My name's Corey. Chair Quisenberry could not be here tonight, so I'm filling in for him. So word to the wise, if you're gonna volunteer to be a vice chair for something, don't do it thinking that you're not gonna have to fill in anytime soon, because it will happen. So we have a full agenda today, so let's go ahead and get started and talk about the agenda for today. Can we have an approval or a motion to approve that?
So made. Sean Williams.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda. The minutes from last meeting, can I have a motion to approve?
Motion made.
Second? Dr. Peters, second?
Discussion.
Oh, sorry. Discussion.
There were two people missing off of the folks present, Dr. Manaya and Chairwoman Gibbons.
And the visitors.
What's that?
And the visitors.
Right.
Any other discussion? I have a second to approve list of changes.
Oh, yeah, visitors.
Visitors, yes.
Do I have a motion to approve with the changes? Second, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Tonight, we are gonna have a short activity, regarding diversity, so Ms. Torres Nunez is going to lead us through that.
Good evening. Okay, so in your folders, you have a circle map, as we refer to them, and it has the word "me" in the center. And we are going to do a dimensions of diversity activity. So in this activity, before you can understand anyone else's diversities, you must first understand your own individual diversities, okay? So we take this map and we break it up into sections. The largest sections always reflect the things that make us the most diverse, or we connect to the most. And the smaller sections might be those minor things, maybe your TV or action movie fanatic, but that's a smaller piece of your life. So this is my personal dimensions of diversity. My larger pieces is I'm a single mother. I have a beautiful 4-year-old boy who is soon to be 5, who inspires me in so many amazing ways. I am an 84 millennial, 1982. And then I came from a mixed race cultural experience. I have an African background, but I also have a Puerto Rican and Indian background. So my experiences growing up were very diverse. I listened to a plethora of music, along with having a plethora of foods and things like that that I've experienced and had the opportunity to grow up with, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to break your own circle up into pieces and write those pieces that make you a diverse individual.
You want us to decide how big a pie?
What's most important to you? Yeah.
Oh.
So it could be religious, it could be your faith, it could be what you identify as or with. What are those pieces that make you a diverse individual?
Generalist. It's hard for me.
And you can put as many pieces in your puzzle that makes you you as you want. Some people just write human. You're human. And that's their entire piece or their circle. And I'll give you about a minute to fill in your circle now. You have about 30 more seconds. right, finish up your thoughts. And now, what we're going to do, we're going to share out with the group. I'm gonna first ask you to share out, if you wanna share out, you don't have to share out, the largest piece of your circle map. Is anybody willing to share out?
Businessman.
He's a businessman, okay? May I also ask, what is the smallest piece of your chunk?
Only child.
Only child. I think we have a few only child in here. Yes, sir. You are black. Okay. Is that the smallest or the largest chunk? The largest chunk. What is your smallest chunk?
The smallest of them all, I am an educator.
An educator, okay? Anybody else want to share out? Yes, ma'am.
My faith,
Your faith is your largest or your smallest?
my largest.
Your largest, okay? And what is your smallest?
My smallest is from Pakistan.
From Pakistan, okay? Thank you. Anybody else? Do I get one more person to share out? Yes, sir.
I had a tie for a top, so slash father slash husband, so.
Father and husband, okay? And what's your smallest?
My smallest, educator.
Educator. So we have a few educators, so we could relate. I think there's quite a few educators in here, but there are many other things that make us identify with each other on the levels of diversity. Somebody may have put they're a cat lover. Anybody put animals on their circle? No? No animal lovers? Anybody else relate with children? Anybody have children? Hey, we have a lot of parents in here. So even though we are diverse individuals, we still relate with others' diversities as well. All right? Thank you so much for participating in this activity and sharing out for those of you that shared out with me today. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, before we move on, this was something that the chair, Mr. Quisenberry, asked that we could do an opening activity. I want to thank Krista for that. This is just one segment of diversity training for leveraging diversity and culture that we provide for our district staff members. And the key part of what she alluded to, for us to see ourselves and talk about diverse and inclusive conversations, we have to understand that we all come with varying levels of diversity when we come to the table. And so the key part to move this from just being an activity but towards some level of action is the last question you notice on your sheet. What can we do to broaden our own personal diversity? And so Chris likely facilitated this last week, and this was just an opportunity, the chair request that we would do just something similar to kind of get started, kind of understanding and break the ice to see what to do. So thank you for your due diligence and the leverage and the activity.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on, we have a few guest speakers here today. So the first one is Ms. Loretta Rao. She's the Executive Director of Student Enrollment, and she's going to talk to us about the plan for student enrollment for next year, 2021.
It's magic. Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to come speak to you tonight. I promise not to take a lot of your time, but I do want to share some information with you because you guys are an important part of our community and you're an important part of our student enrollment process. I am with Student Enrollment. I'm the Executive Director, and we work very hard to get students enrolled in their schools, and hopefully we have a school for them to choose from that is fitting to what their requests or their concerns or needs are. So I'm just going to start with, I'm sharing this at all of our advisory committees, and this year I'm very excited that I also shared it with the Student Advisory Committee. I challenged them to send me 50 emails to the Student Enrollment email for their feedback. I didn't get any emails from students asking questions. I got pictures. So I thought that was very exciting. The next day I opened my student enrollment email. They sent me pictures. They sent me pictures of their family. They sent me pictures of their school. And some of them sent me cartoon characters. So I thought at least they were listening. They got the enrollment part right. They just didn't know what to ask me for sure. So this week we are presenting at EDAC, and I'm also presenting at DAC on Wednesday night. So I look forward to your feedback as we go through the process. The first thing, there's just our little timeline for you to be aware of. But we made some changes this past year, or the current school year we're in, and I just wanted to update you on them. We changed our name. We used to be Student Assignment. Ignore the outside of the building that it still says Student Assignment. We haven't got the letters yet, but we are Student Enrollment. We are trying to change the perception that we don't assign students. We allow them to enroll in the school of their choice. We hope it's their choice. Let's just put it that way. We also reordered the plan. The plan is very wordy. It's been around for 22 years and there's a lot of history in it. We don't want to do away with the history, but we want to put things that are important right now for the people in the front. We put the historical part in the back of the plan. We did our first pilot for kindergarten pre-registration last year. So we're very excited about that. We're so excited, we're doing it again right now. We started on September the 23rd and we run through November the 1st. So if you know any woman in any organization that you're in, as long as they live in Lee County, that will be starting kindergarten next year, please encourage them to come ahead and pre-enroll their student. They'll get to do all the paperwork. There's no lines and waiting. And they'll never have to set foot back in the office again. They'll get everything via mail and then they can do it online. So parents are quite happy when they look at you and say, I'll never have to come back here again. Yeah, I guess that's true if you want to think of it that way. But most of them are very happy because they get to sit down. They're very nervous. Most of them bring their children when they come because they're afraid their children might need to do a test. And I said, no, we don't do a test. We just want to get your paperwork to get you started. We also limited our choices for our elementary students because in some of the schools, they have up to 17 choices in some of the subzones, which is way, way too many. And we are working on that with our proximity plan. But we have limited it to if you get your first, second, or third choice out of 17, that's probably schools that you're pretty satisfied with. So we take you off the eligibility pool. We got very few complaints about that process. We limited our middle school students to getting transfers just at the semester because we're looking at stabilizing the classroom, and that has worked extremely well. And we also reduced our eligibility pool or our wait list from 15 days down to 10. The sooner that we can get the classroom settled, the better we're going to have learning occurring. So we're moving forward with some requests for this upcoming year that I'd like your feedback on if you want to provide any. We're looking at waivers. Those are the papers that parents can submit if they don't like the school or they have a reason that they don't need their child enrolled at that school. So we're looking at creating a medical waiver. I'm so happy Mr. Bradley's here because he's with Health Services. So we rely on our Health Services department when parents talk about medical conditions. Who better to know about the medical conditions than the school nurses that work with those children daily? So we have developed a medical waiver so that they will have a better understanding of the requirements. We also are looking at our waivers for siblings. Oftentimes we have a kindergarten student that might get accepted into one school and then the parent wants to waiver the older child in. We want to limit it to the younger one going with the older one, not the older one following the younger one. So that's why we're really focusing on that. And then we want to look at a final date to submit waivers. Now, keep in mind, we will accept waivers year-round because we enroll students every day up until the last 2 weeks of school. But for those students that are part of our district, and if they've got a school of assignment, and we want to limit those waiver submittals till July the 31st, the last day of July every year. Because if they've already been part of our system, then they had the opportunity to submit a waiver in a timely manner. We're looking at classroom stability, and that's our key focus. The next part is our eligibility pool. This, again, is all about classroom stability. Just like the waivers, we want to cut this date back to our transfers will occur by July 31st. Again, we enroll students year-round, so we'll work with them. But when we have the eligibility pool, the students have been on that eligibility pool since March when we ran the open enrollment. Let's stop it by the last day of July. That allows us time to get transportation set up because when school starts, it could take up to 2 weeks for transportation. So if we cut those eligibility pools or movements down until the last day of July, then we're going to get transportation. They can get their better supplies. They'll know what's needed at the school. And also the school knows who's going to be in those classrooms. We want to know who's going to be in the seats. We also just for your information, we did the eligibility pool this year, and I turned back to my notes because I want to make sure I get it right. We had over 700 students that we offered a seat to off the eligibility pool. Some of them didn't get an offer until the 10th day of school. Of those, only 250 accepted that seat. Exactly 268 accepted. The rest of them declined the seat. They said, hey, we're already in school. We don't want to move now. And it's a lot of time-consuming effort to get them enrolled, make those phone calls, get a hold of the parents, send an email, send a letter, whatever we gotta do, then follow up with them, get them withdrawn, get them re-enrolled. For over half of them to turn down the seat. The majority of them are at the elementary level kindergartners that accept the seat. After that, it really, really tapers off. The next thing we want to focus on for this upcoming year is transfers. Now, this is a unique statement. And I think at first when I heard this presented, I kind of went, wow, that's big. But then after I listened to the principals, I understood. So we have students at the elementary level that can move anytime they want, as long as the seat's available. We have some elementary students that will go through 12, 13 schools in their elementary career. That's a lot of movement for students, 2 schools a year. High school students, right now we have high school students that are seniors that have been in 10 of our high schools. Now, if they have an address change, that's one thing. But what happens is they start a high school, somebody makes them mad, they move. They start another high school, something happens, grades aren't good, something happens, they want a new school. This isn't about change of address, it's not about a change in their exceptional student education, it's about not being happy or always looking for something else. So if you think about a school setting, you have 2 semesters. If you're moving schools every semester, it's really hard to keep up. It's really hard to stay on top of your education. It's hard to develop that culture in the classroom. It's hard to ensure that you're going to get having academic success if you're constantly moving schools. So I met with our principals that are in our most at-risk schools. We call them our Tier 3 schools, but our most at-risk schools, a whole room full of them. The one thing they wanted out of student enrollment was classroom stability. They wanted time to instruct the student. Every principal said, I can take a student if I have them all year, and we can raise that student academically. We can make a change in them. But if we only have them for 9 weeks or semester, and then they leave, it's hard for them to get, acclimated to the new school. It's also hard for the teacher to have a real feeling of what the student's needs are. So it's about supporting the student. So what we would like to propose is 1 transfer per level. That means you get your classroom in kindergarten, and if something happens and you think another school in your same subzone would be better, you can have 1 move per level. So you can move 1 time at the elementary. You get a class in 6th grade or a school in 6th grade, you can move 1 time in those middle levels. You get a class or a school in 9th grade, you can move 1 other time at the high school level. Now that does not count if you have a change of address and your school's not in your zone. Doesn't count if you submit a waiver, you've got some kind of major hardship or medical condition, or if you have something with exceptional student education and the classroom you need is not offered at that school. Those are all separate. We're just talking about the students that have had the past history of moving quite a bit. The next thing we want to talk about is re-enrollment. We're a very mobile district. Students move. Students have the opportunity to go to charter schools. They have the opportunity to go to private schools. They can go to another school in the state of Florida. They can go to another state or another country. But when they come back, what would be the best place for them to be? Because oftentimes they go back to live in the same address they were when they left. They go back to the school they were at. So we want to re-enroll students if they already had a school in our district, they're going back to that same address or an address within that zone, put them back at the school where there'll be a teacher and a principal that knows that child. They can work with them. So that's what we want to talk about with re-enrollment. These are things that they got on our long list, but they didn't get on our short list for recommendations. We want to continue to look at our programs or attractor schools, those things that would cause students to want to go to school. We have a very changing economy. We live in a very diverse district. So we want to make sure that we're offering programs that are going to meet students' needs. I spent a lot of time today at Fort Myers Technical College and listening to the opportunities that they provide our older students, our adults. What can we offer the students themselves that's going to be encouraging? We also want to continue to talk about our charter enrollees. We're a great partner to our charter schools. And we want to make sure that parents are making the right decision. Will their child function better at the charter or should they stay here? So we want to make sure we're providing that communication. Very excited that Terry Kennedy is here working with our charters and our grants because she and I want to really work with the charter schools themselves to make sure we're sharing information. Because some students do benefit from a smaller class size at the charter schools. We want to look at our residential choice zones. This is kind of limited, and I'm not talking about the proximity plan. I'm talking about like in the West Zone, the Cape area. We have students that live at the very southern part of the Cape at the high school level. They may have to ride a bus all the way to Island Coast or one of the schools in the northern part of the Cape. During season, we all know that that can be a very long bus trip, or if the parent needs to get to the school. We want to look at how we can limit those to be more within where the parent lives. Another issue that we come across is in the East Zone, our Lehigh area. We have Manatee Elementary, is not far from here, but those students can attract students all the way from almost the Henry County line. So that's a very long bus ride for a kindergartner to go all that distance. But we also have to make sure that we can have the capacity of our schools if we shut down some of those. The other thing is our ESE programs, our exceptional student education programs. We want to make sure that those offerings, those special classrooms are available to the students within a close capacity to where they live. And that's going to be something we're constantly looking at and constantly changing because our students move and their needs are often different. We also want to talk about our FSA levels. We want to make sure that we're having a fair share amount of students that are level 1s in each school, level 2s, based on their FSA scores, level 1 being the lowest, level 5 being the highest. We don't want one school to have all the level 4s and 5s and one school to have all the level 1s and 2s. An equal distribution. Yes, sir.
FSA stands for what?
Florida Standards Accountability, our assessment. And then with our proximity plan, this is still something, I think that you guys got some information about this maybe a couple years ago. This continues to be something the district is looking at. We want to look at our elementary to begin with, but looking at the areas where our students live. Instead of having the big area of having up to 17 schools to choose from, we look at a smaller area and we may only have 5 schools to choose from. Some people refer to it as more of a neighborhood school, but they're not always just in your neighborhood. It could be other choices. So we'd still look at a choice process, but we also want to look at the proximity of those schools. Again, that goes to our choice subzones at the elementary level. This is starting at the elementary. We hope then to look at it towards the middle and high. But right now, the problem with our district is we're growing by 1,500 to 2,500 students a year. And we're continuing to have that massive amount of growth. It's hard to predetermine where students are going to live. Plus, every time I drive down some of the major roads, I see another apartment complex going up, and it's not just one house, it's 200 houses in 3 buildings. So that's part of the issue that we continue to have. But please know that that is on our radar. That's also going to help with our bus transportation, those early hours, those start times, students being outside. But again, this is something that it takes a little while to create things like that. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, again, is looking 5 years down the road. Where do you see student enrollment being? What is something that we as a district can be proactive to doing? I think part of it is when those parents come in to pre-register their kindergarten students, when they look at you and say, I never have to come back here again, it kind of hurts my pride to think that they don't want to come back again. But obviously there's something that we need to be doing as a district and as a department that will make them happier with the process. So we've been doing the student choice or the choice process for 20 plus years. With that, things have changed in the district. So what do we need to do as a district, or what do we need to be thinking about for the future? I'm not asking for an answer today, I'm asking you to put some thought into it, and I would like some feedback. One thing I am asking for some input on today, and this is something I want you to think about, when I say 20+ years, I sincerely mean it. We have waiver committees, so if you submit a waiver and it gets denied, it goes through 3 levels. We're looking at a level 1 committee and a level 2. Our level 3 committee is made up of community members. Those community members have been the same 3 community members for 22 years. Believe it or not. So, what I'm asking for is maybe some volunteers. I'm gonna ask the same question at DAC, but for some volunteers that might be interested in serving on that committee. You basically would come with fresh eyes, look at the waiver, and determine, is this a true need, or how can we help this family who's bringing up a concern? So I would really like for you to consider a little bit of your time to maybe be part of that committee. I mentioned it to our acting chairperson, and she's either gonna talk about it tonight or she'll bring it up at the next meeting as an agenda item. This is how you get a hold of us, studentenrollment@leeschools.net. So any input you have, any ideas, suggestions, feedback, or volunteering you'd like to do, feel free to email me, because I get all of the emails and I try very diligently to respond in 24 hours. Today, we only had 80+ emails. I haven't quite got through all of them today, but I will have them by this time tomorrow night. I will get through all of them, even if it's a response saying, I will get back to you, I promise, I just need a little bit more time. With that, that is our plan, our proposal that we're moving forward with for the board, and we'll be sharing it. Do I have any questions or comments? Sir?
I've got a question on ESE. Do we offer any specialty programs for dyslexic students aside from our reading comprehension set aside?
So I'm not familiar with the program, but I do know that I read something just recently about some evaluations that were done by a psychologist. But I do have our former ESE director sitting over here as my buddy. You're welcome, Chuck. So, Chuck, I know it's been talked about, that it's very hard to determine and diagnose that.
Because of the wide spectrum of dyslexia, it can run from a very mild disability to a very severe disability. It falls under a group of disabilities that are based on the actual effect on learning. And so they're called specific learning disabilities, SLD. There has been a huge push in the last year in the state to address dyslexia specifically. While it's not recognized as a disability on its own, we do recognize that there's a lot of need for our teachers to be more familiar with what dyslexia is, how it works, and then how to help students who have that disability in the classroom. So currently, the state has a required amount of training that each reading teacher must go through now on dyslexia. And then there's a huge support project that's going on around the state now on everything from supplemental curriculum to instructional strategies to small supports, additional supports that may be needed, like small group instruction.
Because I know someone who had to pull their student out of public school and put them into a very expensive private school.
Sure.
Just to handle the disability. And I thought it was the public school's place to at least identify that disability and to help provide at least a plan of action to mitigate and make sure that they get the correct education out of the system. And unfortunately, I hear it from a lot of folks that even when you do have a plan, that the parents have to be on the backs of administration constantly to make sure that the schools are actually doing what they said that they're going to do. And that if something happens and they agree to a plan of action, that the parents are ending up coming in from work, and of course they're not the happiest when they have to leave work to take care of an issue with their child at school. And then it's something that was agreed upon in the plan of action. And they're getting pulled away because the school isn't adhering to the plan. So my question would be on the ESE monitoring, when they change for the ESE plan not being, is that gonna be held against these students? Because the schools aren't doing what they're supposed to do. And again, I'm getting one side of the story, and I'm sure that there's another side of it.
Well,
I'm sorry to hear that. And
Very,
to answer,
very
to
sorry.
give you a short answer, we would definitely not hold that if it was a true concern with the family. Now, what we do, and this is something that Chuck and I started just this past, I guess this is the second year we've been doing it now with student enrollment. When we have students that enroll new to the district from other places, we ask questions, there's questions on the actual form itself, that if the parent indicates that the child had a 504, that would be a plan that they don't meet for exceptional student education, but they're getting additional time or maybe some supports in the classroom, things like that. Then the parent, while they say that, we communicate directly with Mr. Bradley, who then follows up with the particular school that child is enrolled in, to making sure that equity coordinator at that school is touching base with the family and ensuring their plan is followed. We also, if the parent mentions something, just like what you're saying, if they were to mention that to me or one of our enrollment specialists now, the first thing I would do would be to email the school and the ESE director and say, this person came in talking about their child, probably give the student ID number. Can you please follow up about the plan that's being implemented? Because oftentimes if they're already in our district, then they're just upset and they come to student enrollment wanting a new school. Well, we don't really want to move schools with them because then it's going to start all over. So the best thing we can do is try to get to the situation itself. And that's where also I involve Chuck in his role with 504s and the MTSS process, the multi-tiered system of support, to make sure that we're working with those families and that communication is occurring, both from what we hear the parents saying, who oftentimes don't say it directly to the principal. We're sharing that directly with the administration team.
So I guess in that system, is there like a third party that somebody, they can say it to the principal 50 times.
Sure.
And if the action doesn't change, then where do they go? I mean, and I
So
understand frustrations.
I don't mean to interrupt you, so maybe we should talk about this particular issue at another meeting and have another group that is qualified to talk about that come in, but for right now, we want to focus on what specifically the recommendations were that she.
And I'm happy to share your concerns with our coordinator in our department, who is ESE background. So that's the other part. We actually communicate directly with family, let the parents talk. But I think that's probably a great idea to have someone from ESE here.
My question was about the waivers.
Yes, sir.
So if a student was diagnosed with an intellectual or developmental disability, would they be considered somebody who would qualify for a medical waiver?
So it depends on what it is,
Yeah.
because they may also have an exceptional student education plan in place. So with that, it may limit the schools that they can enroll in. But we do capture that information due to the new mental health process that's part of our enrollment plan. We capture that information as long as we're made aware of it. So we want to make sure, our goal is to make people happy. You're going to have a better relationship with the family and the school if they're pleased with the school, if the student's happy. And oftentimes it's not the student that wants to move, it's all about the parent. So we want to make sure that we're capturing those things, and we want to make sure that we're meeting their needs. Sometimes we can't put everybody at one particular school, but we can try very hard to make sure programs are enticing to the schools and the parents, and we're meeting their needs. Everybody's different. Yes, ma'am.
How do you come to the decision regarding the waiver for the siblings? I ask because my son got in the school, it was a K-8, and my daughter, who is younger, got in the school because of him.
Mhm.
So I'm asking why make that
So that's the way we want it to
suggestion
work. We want the younger one to go with the older one,
Okay.
because that way they're there. But what occurs now sometimes, and especially in those K-8 schools, maybe the 5th grader or 6th grader didn't get in, or they may not have applied. But when they enrolled their kindergartner, they might get that school because they decline the sibling waiver. And then they, oh, can I take my other kid and my other one and my other one to this school? And then that really throws our capacity off. So what we would like to do is continue to implement our sibling assignment where the younger one goes with the older one as long as they're in school. So we don't want to change that process.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
I think, is it his turn?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I see the changes in school what you have explained. What is missing to me is what is the big picture? What is the outreach goal? Where are you going in these changes? Is it just the stability in the classroom? And could it also have an effect of advanced process on the neighborhood, the public schools and all that? To get outreach into that. So what is the big picture and relate to the parts of the classes?
So our big picture is looking at the classroom stability and hopefully getting those students in the school that they need to be in from the very beginning. That's the first goal. The second goal is our proximity plan, and I'll need to go back a slide. I think our proximity plan at the elementary level is going to help those students be in that neighborhood school that they probably want to go to, but also have 2 or 3 outlying schools that due to the parents' work schedule or something like that, they may prefer them to have a school that they're going to ride a bus to instead of the parent having to be there to walk them home. So that's part of the process. But again, that's why we offer the waivers, because we want to be able to listen to parents' needs. You can't just say, this is what gets approved for a waiver, because everyone has a unique situation. And it oftentimes takes a little bit of time to go through those waivers, because you have to really listen to what the parents are asking. And then you sometimes pick up the phone and call and say, the why. Give me more information as to why. And it may be a domestic disturbance that the parent's trying to get away from.
And in that proximity plan, have we ever thought about the 2-mile radius where they have to walk in the bus and not get there? What, have you been something about that?
So- That's a transportation question. I know that that's part of the statute, that you do not provide the bus if they live within 2 miles. But we also know that some of our roads in Fort Myers are very, very busy. So transportation is trying to be aware of that, and they definitely do not want students crossing the road. That's why we really want to limit those waivers to the last day of July. That allows transportation some time to look at who needs, where's everybody at, how's this going to impact a student if they're walking to school. And it's not very timely. If parents move the 10th day of school and then they have 2 more weeks before a bus is ready for them. So that's a big situation we're having to deal with. Thank you so much for your time. Feedback at studentenrollment@leeschools.net.
Dr. Blakely, did you have a question?
I know you had put your hand up first.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if there had been some statistical review of the transfers, of number of transfers per year, and any trends with where students are leaving from, as well as their performance throughout the who's like frequent flyers. You said there has been statistical tracking of those students.
How do I say that? Our transfers, I think we're looking at 2 different things. So our transfers are typically more at the elementary level. It's not really at the high school. It's more of our kindergarten students. It's not the high school or middle school. But a lot of our transfers are related to transportation. That would be your follow-up. Every waiver that I read today had something to do with this school is a 45-minute drive for me as a parent. Was reading a waiver right before I came in. Student got hurt at school nurse called the parent, needed stitches. Mom was 45 minutes away from the school, at least. Nurse called 3 times in the travel time for the parent to get there saying, are you coming? You know, we need to get him to the emergency room. Do you want us to call an ambulance? No, I'm on my way, but I got caught by this light and this light and this light. So that's a real concern, and it's about transportation. And thankfully, I'm not in that department. Well, knock on wood, but I'm not in that department because it's a real problem for the district because this is such a big district and very limited road space.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Mr. Edie, can I ask you, in volunteering before, is that something that the committee votes on, or is that just people?
For this particular
If they're
presentation,
interested to do it, yeah.
the board policy just says, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, are you asking about the ESE or just as part of what's represented?
Her request to have someone from the committee volunteer to serve.
If you get volunteers, my suggestion would be, if you have more than one volunteer, then just take a vote, very similar to what we did for the site selection with Ms. Martinez and Ms. Sal, when she was previously on the board. Since Ms. Ralph, you're requesting just one person from BDAC,
We can take two.
okay, so my suggestion would be soliciting
Okay.
and see how many you get, and then,
I'm sure they'll all want volunteer.
how long is the question?
Is anyone here today interested in doing this, or would you like to have this on the agenda for next meeting to talk more in depth about it before we take any volunteers?
I think we should have it in the next agenda, because we have schedules and stuff that we have to take into consideration, so even if we want it and we're interested, we still need to fit it into our.
We need a few more details as well.
Yes.
Yeah, days and how many days a week, a month, or whatever.
So we actually, most of our level 3 committee meetings occurred in the summer because that's when we get the waivers. We don't have that many, I think we met 3 times this past summer, but we can meet during the day, we can meet via email, we can meet in person. It's not something that the committee, they have to decide as a group. The committee members can each have their own opinion, and then we look at what the total is. So if we have 4 from this, or 2 or 3, and we get a couple more, then we just wanna make sure we have an odd number, because I sure don't want to tie.
Is that a consensus, and we'll add it to the agenda for next meeting? Okay, so moving on, our other speakers today are Mr. Chuck Bradley and Mr. Brian Williams, who are going to talk to us about the non-discrimination policy.
This is something that we discussed last year related to updating our non-discrimination policy. So we have our staff attorney here, as well as Mr. Bradley, who will do the introduction, but just so the board is aware, this was something that we talked about toward the latter part of last year, making sure the specific clauses were added to our non-discrimination policy. It is not because we were not, quote unquote, not out of compliance, but we're trying to make sure that we get certain things added into protection of our district.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
I'll lead off, I'll introduce where we are and get you to the language that we're proposing. Then I'm gonna let Mr. Williams take over for the legal perspective on where we're coming from and why, where we're going to go, or where we would like to go. So non-discrimination, our district has had a non-discrimination policy. It's been, as Mr. Edie said, it's in compliance, and we have a lot of good language in our policy. But over the last year in particular, we have been monitoring several issues that have been coming to our district through various avenues for both students and for adults. And in particular, for students, we have, I'm now overseeing Title IX for students, and we have had a lot of issues come up around sexual harassment, gender, and gender identification, particularly with transgender students who identify in a way that is not in accordance with perhaps their birth identification. So we are working through those issues, and Title IX is going through the same issues across the country for both students and adults. And so we want to identify some language in there. Socioeconomic status. Many of our students come from varied backgrounds of socioeconomic status, from very wealthy to homelessness and poverty. So we want to make sure that all students are identified and are protected in our non-discrimination policy based on that. Ethnicity and language. We are growing in diversity of language in our district. When I first started working with Lee County many years ago, this is in the 90s when I was coming down to do training, I think they had about 23 languages in the district. We're well over 100, 120, 130, somewhere in that arena right now. So a lot of languages that are in our district. Family structure and background. From the regular family structure that mom and dad and 2 kids and a car and a garage and a dog in the house, single family, single parent families, and then same-sex gendered families, and blended families of all kinds. So we have varied family structures and backgrounds that we deal with. Disability, and disabilities, we've already had a mention of that tonight, that our definition of disabilities has been growing and expanding as we begin to understand more about disability and its impact on education. We've, of course, in the news, we've seen racial and ethnic profiling, and so many of our students feel that within school as well, and especially in our, with some of the political things that are going on in our country today. A lot of that comes back into our campuses, so making sure our students are protected there. And then around beliefs, both religious and political beliefs. And so the ability to express your beliefs without fear of being discriminated against in those areas. So these are some areas that we've been dealing with. And so what we have done is we've put a proposal together. We looked at our original policy. This was our original policy that covered things like gender, race, color, age, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national, ethnic origin, marital status, or disability. And what we have done is we've looked at reorganizing the language first, so that's why there's a strikeout of that entire piece. All of those pieces that were in the original policy are included still, so they've just been rearranged. We just found it easier to make one big strikeout and then rearrange those pieces. And the reason we rearranged them is that we borrowed from some model policies in the state that have aligned the district, this language in this order. There's no other reason other than it helps us to identify this as a model policy in the state. We have added, though, some pieces in here, and you'll find gender identification, and helping our schools to understand the difference between gender and then how a student identifies. And especially now, we're seeing different ways of identification, from transgender to gender fluid, and that making sure that our students are protected in those arenas. Social and family background. So that covers a wide variety of issues, including socioeconomic issues, family structure, and other pieces within there. Linguistic preference, and we added pregnancy in. We do have a program in our district that was originally created for pregnant teens, called the LAMP program, but we now have students who are pregnant who want to attend school in their regular school and should have the right to do so. So we wanted to make sure that that piece was in there as well. Some of the other pieces that I mentioned earlier are still in discussion, and we're not really ready to formulate those at this time. Mr. Williams can probably elaborate on that as he begins to speak, but this is the language that we'd like to get your feedback on tonight, and to think about, and please give us your feedback as we look at taking this forward to our board for consideration and review and adoption. So, Mr. Williams, if you have anything else you'd like to add, please.
Well, first of all, good evening. I don't think I've met this committee. I'm sorry.
You're good.
My name is Brian Williams, and as Chuck mentioned, I'm the staff attorney for the school district. Chuck did a very good job going over what the district's plans are. Just to summarize, our goal is to really crack down on these issues, and that's the reason for expanding this. And while I was sitting there, actually, I want to add another sentence after pregnancy that would just say, and any other legally prohibited basis, just to be all-encompassing. Because the goal here with respect to discrimination is to cover all groups and leave no groups out with respect to our non-discrimination policy. One of the issues that I think has been brought before this committee is the creation of the Office of Civil Rights and Equity, as well as the hiring of a coordinator in that particular department. One of the purposes of that is to, again, enforce these policies. They're only as good as the enforcement with respect to them. The other component of it that Chuck and I will probably be back in front of you to talk about is the education. We're going to also, with the creation of that office, bring an educational component with respect to these things as it relates to training on these issues. So it's not just so much that you have a policy that prohibits them. It's important that you get out at every level both at the administrative level as well as the school site, to train everyone not only with respect to the laws as it relates to enforcement of this, but also the steps to take if you are subject to this. So again, combining both the creation of policy, I always say from the lawyer perspective, you start with the creation of the policy, then you go into the processes, and then you couple that with education about the processes, then you go with enforcement and putting out information to your staff and students on how to report these issues so that they do not go unchecked. Again, it is a concerted effort by the district to move forward and protect not only our staff and students, but everyone that comes into contact with the district. So I think that sums it up for me. I don't know if there's any questions or comments.
I have a question, only gender identification, have you all considered gender expression as well as far as that language? Because they may not identify in the gender, but they express it as that.
No, I mean, that's a good comment, and, you know, that's why we come here. So, I mean, it's to get feedback. Again, we're trying to be as encompassing as possible, but, you know, we'll certainly, you know, take that into consideration. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you actually answered what was always in my mind. For the last elements, I had to do afterwards. But I also had you mention and any other legally, there could be so many other forms of discrimination, let's say even height, for example, anything else. So you don't want to be like pregnancy and any other form of discrimination.
Correct, and like I said,
Not just legal, there are others which are not legal, but you don't want discrimination, it's not.
No, and even just sitting there, you read this thing enough, you'll just keep adding to it or changing it. You know, I was sitting there with Chuck and we were looking at the different groups, and so for example, I don't know how many are familiar with the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, but ancestry is a big thing nowadays too, that's also included in non-discrimination policies. So that's not in there, but we can also add that. You know, so the goal was to, again, be all encompassing, and that's why I wanted to put that catchphrase in there, but obviously we don't, you know, we could just keep listing and listing and listing until we get to, you know, and just a very long list. But again, I think, you know, this is what I will say based on what I know about this district, this is a substantial move in the right direction, because again, you know, as times change, different issues become pertinent, not only in the world, but in education. And again, the expanding these other areas, even social and family background, I mean, that's pretty substantial when you consider how many kids could potentially be affected by that. And it's just not something that was originally, you go back and look at historical non-discrimination or discrimination policies, it just wasn't in there because people weren't thinking of it. So again, you know, we're putting this out there, you know, for not only your comments and thoughts, but you know, just to show you again that the district is taking that step forward. And what I say with any policy, policies are meant to be amended and changed. So this is again, another step forward. It's a living, breathing document. We always encourage, you know, the ability, if we come up with something new, we'll add it. I don't think there's any issue with doing that.
So I have a few thoughts.
Sure.
My concern is for the school board and the liability and how broad the language is around social and family background. It creates a whole wide range of things that could be discrimination. I want to encourage you to think about the liability for the school system on a whole and really figure out what it is we're trying to say there, because there's a lot that could fall into that category. And then my second question was medical conditions. Let's say there's a student who's diagnosed with HIV from birth. That's not really represented anywhere here because that's a medical condition that they would have. It's not necessarily a disability, and you can't really say that's part of their family or social background. So I want to make sure that those students are being.
Just one part of that, Mr. Russo. The district has a separate policy just for students, HIV students, and an AIDS and HIV policy that's specifically part of our board policy. So there's always kind of one section.
I don't know whether or not we do this well, but I know social and family background, but they felt economic something. Socio-economic needs to be something. Social is not enough. Yeah. You need socio-economic status or something. There must be something about that. So there's a serious form of discrimination.
Yes. No, and again, and to your point, that there were things that I took out of this, just so you know.
If it was my company and I was signing this policy, I don't know that it would be that broad.
No, and Chuck will tell you, even this morning when I read it again, you know, obviously the goal is to be, you know, as expansive as possible, but you are correct, there are certain things that lead the district to you know, expand the liability associated with these policies, so, again, that's a comment well taken.
I've got a couple of things, only a few comments. I agree with the gender expression. I think, like, even when we speak about medical conditions, even a diabetic, I mean, if a child has to wear a pump because he's diabetic, there shouldn't be any bullying or any discrimination because of that. Or if he needs to be excused to be able to take care of that medical condition.
So I will say legally, medical conditions fall under 504 equity, which is identified as a disability under 504. So they are.
So would pregnancy also be included under that?
That is not considered a disability. Under
Well, I thought it was at one point.
Pregnancy is not considered a disability.
And then also, with the entrance of the civil rights case before the Supreme Court, like the three that are together
Yes.
regarding sexual orientation, gender identification, and expression.
Yes.
How would that change this policy, or would it just make certain parts of this policy moot?
So right now, the board controls their policy, and they have to comply with anything that is federal or state. They can go above and beyond that if they so choose. So if those cases are one and we already have it in our policy, it's kind of a moot point. Even if they fail, if the board so chooses to put those in our policy, they can.
Yeah, I was gonna, just to echo what Mr. Bradley said. Again, our board approves this, we can always go above what the federal and state law does, and typically a lot of school districts do, because again, you know, the federal government can make decisions that they make, but you know, we wanna again try to encompass all groups that may be impacted by such a policy, so I think that would be a discussion that we probably would brief them on when we have that discussion, but certainly give them the option of leaving the language in there.
And my only point in asking that was, is this something that needs to be enacted now, or is it something that we could possibly wait until June 26, 2020? Or is this something that the district is wanting to address now for this school year?
From my end, I think it's something we need to address now. I mean, just having seen the issues that come before our district and our staff, as well as Chuck's office, these are issues. Some of those areas that aren't in here are, we deal with on a weekly basis with school sites. And so, again, to give better direction to our staffs and students, we need to have it in the policy so that they understand what is protected and what is considered discrimination as the school board sees it. You know, again, you know, what the court system does, you know, I think we could all take a perspective on what we think might happen. You never know with the judicial branch, although you kind of see the direction that the Supreme Court is headed. It's important that we have these types of, especially as it relates to discrimination, these types of policies on the books at present, so that again we can enforce and again educate. Because I think the key component to that is letting our staff know that we've revised this. These are protected, you know, classes, and you need to, you know, we need to educate you about how to identify those issues.
And the last question I have is for food insecure and homelessness. Because that socioeconomic backlash can be extreme.
Thank you. So we can certainly address that. To me, that connects with the socioeconomic conditions, so we can
Yes.
address that.
And one of the things, and I know you've been waiting patiently, that I want to highlight, because you mentioned it, this is our non-discrimination policy. We also have a bullying and harassment policy that will likely bring before this committee that specifically addresses issues as it relates to our students. And I don't want to, you know, overshoot that, but again, these are some of the things that are coming up will probably definitely be incorporated into
that policy. And just to link it, this forms the foundation for those other policies. So once we get this in place, then we go back and we redraft those policies as well. Sir?
Also, a couple of issues, and I'd like you to enlighten me on. I see here, I'm not sure what is the difference between sex and gender, and if you can enlighten me on that, and also race and ethnicity. The second part is linguistics. Unfortunately, I had a situation personally where we mentioned on one of the application that we talk another language in home. And though they were very, very helpful, but eventually my child, I mean, of course, I commend the Lee County system. I mean, definitely they took care of it, but eventually I found that my child actually lagged behind because we didn't express that we are a little different. So they didn't mean to discriminate, but because of they were so keen to look at it, and that worked against us. But eventually, we cleared out. I'm not pointing fingers or anything, but these are the two issues that I have as an experience, and my understanding maybe is lacking. What is the different, aspects of this language?
Sure. Well, I'll address sex and gender. Sex typically is going to refer to the assignment of sex at birth. Gender and gender expression, gender identity tend to be a self-selected process. So somebody, and this is where now we're getting into an arena too, we're looking at a fluid gender scale where people may identify at any point along that scale between male and female or something totally different based on how they see themselves. I always go back to, I have a little bit of, I put it on my knee, that I have a little bit of a Native American ancestry, and so I love reading about my Cherokee roots, and they often talk about those that are of two spirits, and that they have both male and female. So that's where it gets a little different when we get to gender identity, gender expression versus just sex. Hit another one there?
Yeah, I think we were on race, color, ethnic, or national origin. Obviously, in those instances, and again, race and color being in here, actually race, color, and national or ethnic origin were part of the original policy. The difference there is, so I'll use myself actually. I was going to use Crystal, but I'll use myself. I mean, when you come from a multicultural background, and you marry, let's say you marry a different background, your child could look completely different than you, and so, but have that heritage that their parents possess. So your ethnicity or your national origin. So for example, my son is as Native American Indian, Mexican, African American. He's got a bunch of things on there. So but if he were to go off his race, he's very lightly complected. So again, just making that distinction. It's so that, again, trying to encompass all of those. When someone's discriminating, they don't make these distinctions, but when we enforce it, we do so that we can properly fit it into the right category.
What about language? We talked about language.
Again, I think Chuck hit on this when he mentioned that we've got over 100 languages currently speaking. Even the dialects, let's take the Spanish language, for example, even the different dialects. I lived in Miami for a period of time, and you've got so many different dialects of Spanish, and people make fun of people based on the different dialect. So, and again, there's a lot of different things, and it could be as simple as, the form of the language or the language itself. So, again, that's more of an encompassing point, but with our multicultural growing district, I think it's, again, important to encompass that, especially when we have so many different dialects being used.
My point was was that though it was encompassed before, it is from long time, and my son is high school now.
Yeah.
But since we mentioned that, the concern was so, I don't know if it is something positive or negative, but eventually it impacted us negatively. Because though there was a preference, there was an understanding that he speaks a different language at home. But eventually that pulled him back because of that specialization. I'm not sure how can I hope I'm clear.
He received special treatment.
And yes,
treatment,
but
treated
it
differently because
impacted
he spoke
him
a different
negatively.
language.
He
Yeah.
was set in a different classroom by himself with ESE or something, and then that was not very good for him. Though we tried many times, and you can go back to the situation, but I mean, I'm not pointing myself as the example, but it impacted us negatively eventually.
So I think that is part of the enrollment process. It asks if there is a different language spoken at home in the preferred language of the family. And that's all triggered to the English second language department, that they have to do testing and evaluation to make sure those needs are being met and the student is getting up to the level that they need to be at English. So I think now it's a little bit different. That department is working to first reach out to the parents to ask, do you need support? And then they do an evaluation. If the student is able to exit out or pass the test, then they're done in getting those supports. So I think that's something
Yes.
that the district has done better through time. I think we probably did overdo it because we wanted to make sure we were providing the supports.
I'll go to the other side of this too. So, that's okay. One of the other pieces here, and I just want to go back to this entire policy. You know, so much of this is responsive to the discrimination that our students are receiving or have received. And there has been an impact around language, in particular in our society over the last 3 or 4 years in particular, where students have felt discriminated against because of their language background. So we want to make sure that this, we mentioned the gender identity, gender expression, and I'll go back to Sean's question about why do we need to do this now? Well, we're facing real issues today with our students, and we have schools that are saying we need guidance on what do we do? What do I do for a transgender student who is asked to use the restroom that they identify with? So we don't have policy that currently guides that. And that's why these are so important to address right now.
And I just want to commend you for taking this on proactively. And that this committee didn't have to sit here and bang our fists to make it happen. I think it begins, and I think you mentioned this as well, as education. A lot of our students, a lot of our teachers don't understand a lot of the terms that are in there. And there are probably several of us in the room that don't really understand distinctions between each. But I think it does start with education. And we need to change our health classes to a 21st century health curriculum. And I know that is not the job of this committee. That's part of the curriculum.
Start talking the issue about that, so.
But it is very important that kids understand that we have differences. Just like we have differences between a male and a female, there are several differences in between that go along with every single one of these. We need to understand what poverty is. We need to understand what a disability is and how much of a struggle it is for them or how it would feel to be disabled. Because we don't teach empathy in the schools. And it's something I don't know if you can even teach, but at least you can teach what it is, and then they can associate however strongly they feel.
So a couple of things, to your point well taken. Ms. Jordan actually said, once you have some of these things up in your office, we've actually built out trainings to support once this is passed. we talked about gender identity and expression and distinction. Almost 2 weeks ago, we had Dee Plaza from Equality Florida come down and provide training for our social workers, for our guidance counselors, our psychologists, also our equity coordinators. As a part of the conversation looking at this, supported with that is understanding the distinction to the comment earlier about race and ethnicity. The best way to look at it, if I gave out 5 red jelly beans, one jelly bean might be strawberry, one might be cinnamon, one might be cherry. It's the same thing looking at ethnic background. Just because race is a social construct, if people understand the distinction between those social nuances. So as we build out the next level of our professional development, we were just looking at that this morning, there's an explicit activity connected to some of those identifications of understanding the difference between race and prejudice and discrimination. So all those nuances that are connected to that, that's why this supports some of that conversation for those protected groups to have professional development in place to support that. So the point about gender identity expression, the principals will receive training next month connected to that provided by Equality Florida, having those resources together. So we're trying to go slow to go very fast, but your point is very well taken, and the things that we've already had in place connected to those.
And we have accommodations.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Conversation. Now, I'm not sure if the committee, Madam Chair, want to, and we did this last year, you all offered motions as a recommendation, if you supported this conceptually. I'm not sure you all wanted to go with that, but I just wanted to take it back to how we did it before. There were things that came up and we felt strongly with the recommendations of things like when we look at adding expression. We support conceptually, but we would like to add whatever it is you got down as a committee, that's your deliberations. What that does for us as staff, we can then put that in as whatever the recommendation is from this committee, and then that floats up to the board, so when they know when it's up for consideration, they're understanding that this has been part of the discussion with that committee, and how you all feel about it. But I just wanted to make sure I brought that historical point of reference out from last year.
I just want to say, in the past, when we did presentations that needed some kind of approval from us, with the changes, for example, the 2 presentations, which are great presentations, I think it was there for the committee to say, we commend or we approve or whatever language we have for that. Yeah, the operation is working good.
It is the prerogative of the
We
committee.
did that in the past, that's what I'm saying.
Just giving points of reference, if that's how the committee would like to go forward. I'll give an example. Last year, I talked about the need of having an required diversity training. I think it might have been Nicole who brought it up. Okay, well, can you make that as a recommendation? You did that, so when it was presented to the board, it was said this has been discussed by the committee. This is their recommendation. So, not to be a part of the discussion, but just a point of reference, Madam Chair, that you all have a recommendation, or just receiving it as input.
I would move that we recommend the proposed language to include gender expression instead of identification. The language that they have here is sufficient, rather than the gender expression.
So motion to approve the language with the,
We can just have the gender expression.
do I have a second?
Just one line, I think there's a red line, there can be a identification and expression, so it doesn't exclude either.
Yeah.
So
I think, Madam Chair, in the trainings that we built out, we have separate lines for identity and expression. So that is just what we.
So it's an addition, not
In addition to change.
and in the context, I know it's a motion that we share, but if we also add the socioeconomic status.
So we have a motion to approve with adding gender expression and socioeconomic status. Do I have a second?
I said,
All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Last thing, so just so
Chair,
the
really
committee.
quick, now the only thing I will say with that, obviously, these policies are subject to board approval and board discussion. So we'll make the recommendations, but in fairness on the social and family background, in light of the concern you raised, I have to give them both sides of it.
Yeah.
And you're correct, there's a balance between, the liability issue and then trying to be all encompassing, so.
So how it works, there's a tracking sheet And this will be logged, very similar to what we all did last year about the recommendation. So, it goes over to Cindy McClung and she kind of tracks it and see what it is in the recommendation. So if and when this comes before as a briefing, Mr. Bradley and Mr. Wood present to the board, they have the purview of saying this is presented to the ELAC committee, here's their suggestion, recommendation. I thought this would add more weight if you all consider that to whatever you all comes with your recommendation. This will be logged in, we actually take the number of members of the committee who were present from our policy, who were here making a recommendation and receiving the input. The purview in the board policy connected to EDAC and student enrollment does not say you all can make an official recommendation, but it does state that your input is needed and required before this policy goes forward. So we also log the number of present members tonight who were here and received it. Outside of whatever you all decide to do as far as recommendation, you all can give Ms. Ralph a recommendation if you like, or you can just say, our input is sufficient. Thank you, Madam.
For Ms. Ralph's presentation, do we want to make any recommendations from that or any input from that?
I move that we hold off on a recommendation for the student senate until after the next meeting, we will hear more about it.
A second for that?
There's a timeline, I'm not sure when this goes.
I think it's, 1st of November. I think so. And then it is, I think it's the second, I don't know that I got the date yet. I think it's.
In view of the timeline, I would like to move a motion that we accept if we have any changes we wanted to make, to propose. So like the attorney said, we are not final, let's remember, we are just making a recommendation and we're going to vote and other committees, you know? We're just having our input that Mr. Eden mentioned, you know? And we accept that unless there are any changes.
The board action meeting is November 19th,
The briefing is the
and the
5th.
briefing is October 31st. And when is our next, November 9th is our next, 4th is our next?
So Mr. Peter, Dr. Peter, your motion is?
My motion,
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Williams had a motion. I'm not sure if we called for a second for his original motion. He said he wanted to, am I correct?
You wanted to wait till, okay.
So we have to call for a second for his motion. If there's no second, then we can open the floor for
Is there a second?
I'll
for the-
second.
Any discussion?
Well, I'm not sure, I mean, we do have a briefing, but not necessarily will that, because I don't have the,
I thought it
exact,
was November the 5th.
yeah, because we
After
have
the briefings.
briefings, but not necessarily is she going to be at that briefing. So, I mean,
I've got the 5th down, and I'm supposed to be at it, and it's on the agenda for the 19th, but that may change.
So any discussion on the motion?
yeah, but the feeling was, I don't think we have anything about this presentation, what we were done, except for the number 3, that was the only one we can hold on to that. That was nothing to do with the presentation. Because you'll get more information later on, accepting what was presented in the motion. Confirming number 3 is what we said, we'll hold on to another meeting.
Any other discussion?
I would like to wait just because I don't feel I have enough information. It's very broad, the construct that they put forward, and I would like to get a little bit more information, especially on ESE and the transfers of what goes against those students and what doesn't.
So right now we have a motion to wait for the next meeting for more discussion. We have a second. So we'll go ahead and do a vote on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so motion is approved to discuss at the next meeting.
My only concern would be with the timeline, because technically, the policy does not require the board to issue a recommendation. That was just for your will if you like. So I don't know, Ms. Ralph, maybe you can have more specific information if it works with the timeline. But as this is usually the first meeting of the year, the Saturday and kind of get some feedback and suggestions from them. But because the timeline that we had set, the board policy does not say shall offer, it just says it can provide input. That was just kind of put out as good measure, if I recall, the committee last year, took a vote and said, oh, we're okay with it. But I believe the way it's structured, I don't know if we'll have enough time to have it, whatever the questions or concerns were.
And I can email those to you
Yes, if you'll
directly,
email those directly, I
so
can give
you
you
at least
feedback.
have a list of my concerns.
And I would send that to you.
And I appreciate that timeline. It's just that this is, from the public's view, this is a huge issue that parents have with the district. Is school choice. I just want to make sure that any recommendation we get supports the.
Totally understand.
Okay. Moving along on the agenda, Ms. Gordon, do you have an update on that?
Actually, I really don't believe this is our first meeting back, but I will say that I will definitely bring that recommendation if it does come up regarding the policy which you all have said here today, so I will make sure that that is stated. And then, we're just moving right along, the board is, we've had some training together, to make sure that we're all working, for the best interest of the district. So that's been going really well, and I've been going and visiting all the schools and speaking to the principals and just letting them know that we're here, we want to hear their concerns, talking to parents, talking to teachers, and just working with the strategic plan right now, which mine is Success Academy, and getting speakers and people to go in there and help with those kids. So I have a great group of people that are willing to go in and be speakers, and if any of you would like to do that on any day, I'd be more than happy to put you on my list. And that's pretty much it. We're just going along, and I'm happy to be here.
What's Success Academy again?
Success Academy is one of our academies where our students are sent there for a brief time. How do you explain that better?
It's our alternative school.
ALC,
place.
yeah.
It's not ALC, it's Success.
Sorry, I graduated almost 40 years ago.
Success Academy. We're making sure they understand that they can definitely not return. That's our goal.
Thank you. Mr. Edie, update on?
Sure, my update is brief. I did talk about some of it earlier related to the training to support LGBTQ students. Crystal, and I would say Crystal, she's just amazing at what she does. No doubt in providing the training and support. A lot of the things we're working on in-house, as well as having consultants come in and provide that diversity level of training and support across the gamut of the protective classes, as well as those that are not part of our protective classes here that are listed in the Non-Discrimination Policy. Outside of that, you all should have received a copy of the diversity newsletter that was put up on the screen. You will be getting the next month's edition coming up very soon. Highlights with inclusion and disability awareness, because we have that Disability Awareness and Employment Month for recognition that was adopted by our board. So that will be coming out to you all very soon after we go through the review process with that. And with that being stated, I'll say Mr. Williams, and Chuck and I participated in some of those, has done the interview for his Civil Rights and Equity Compliance Coordinator, as you said, so pretty soon, as I shared with you all before. Hopefully someone will be in that position soon, and by December maybe, we'll have that individual here, so you all can see and have conversation and know that we're working on as it relates to civil rights and equity compliance. As you all are aware, that is a job description I did present to you all last year. In addition to having you all approve it, I'm gonna make recommendations to it. It's now come to fruition with the interview, and of course, Crystal, the embodiment of the diversity coach. So that is the next piece of the puzzle, if you will. And that being said, thank you for your service, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for your service, and that's all I have.
Actually, I just want to say real quick, we are so lucky, this county is so lucky to have the two of them.
Please.
No, I'm serious, because they are out there every day, making sure that people understand what is taking place in training, so thank you. What time is it too? All of you, thank you all.
I wanted, hi, my name is Maria Martinez, and I was in this committee for the last 2 years. And I was talking to Debbie about things that we have been doing to expand library services. I'm the library outreach associate for the Lee County Library System, and I just wanted to let you know that we have been working very close with the school district to reach out to, through the migrant program, we have been going out to the camps and just getting our services out there. We're also doing the ESOL Parent Institutes this past month, and we've been talking to them about the services that we provide because we want to open doors to those that are learning English from every single, no matter what kind of language. And it's, it's related to what we discussed today, because that's a way to open services to everybody. And the last one is the adult and career education program that we have also been going and talking and making presentations to the ESOL and the GED students. And this is our committee has to do with a lot of this, and I'm very proud to let you know that the school district has been opening those doors for the parents that really need it in the district. That's all. Sorry, thank you so much.
So, moving on, we're getting to the end of the agenda here. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to mention or would like to see maybe on next meeting's agenda for discussion?
No, not enough. I mean, it is the fact of the good of the order.
Okay, yeah, that's where we're at. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. This is following up on that, and I want to also comment what you just mentioned. It's a great team we have, and it feels very good. At the first week of November, we have a conference here, Association for the Advancement of Education Research International, and the Professional Development has appointed a number of people that don't have the full list, but it's a list. Some of the training for the teachers is on something we can call administrative program, where we are trying to promote, the people coming from all over the world to San Mario, that will be having sessions for the school district to promote the diversity of the areas. And that's a powerful thing. I just wanted to mention that. Yes, it's good. The next thing I wanted to mention also is the doing anti-human trafficking programs here, and that will go into the schools. It's important to go. We started with the mayor's about it, but also here we'll be talking about it in a short while, and it helps a lot in what's going on.
With health, human trafficking, Alicia Gore, our teacher on assignment, she and I had a conversation a week ago. So it's connected to human trafficking. So you talk about making sure that our health team can get into the 21st century. She's our TOA, and we get it's on her radar when we talk.
And did I hear somewhere that they are putting that training out to the students as well, so that they can
There's
identify?
something that appears, I've seen it posted here and there, something that goes, but I think we start from the teachers and goes now.
Right.
It starts in the right place.
Right.
Before it goes down. But first point was the community and then the going down.
Is there an opportunity to look at the training that we're talking about and offer recommendations on that? On the education, training of the staff? Will we ever get to look at that, or can I have a copy of that emailed to me?
Which
Perhaps.
copy of?
Well, the diversity training, the inclusion training that we keep talking about that relates to that policy, do we get to look at it?
Sure. Once it's all finished and adopted,
And
that was part of this
make recommendations
conversation
for
of
that?
what we did today.
Okay.
That was just one activity that's included in part of it. I think part of it is that we also consult with outside diversity entities. So that's the training they kind of facilitate. This is the district, everything's public record, so.
Any other comments?
One part of it, I think it's important to note also, the continuum, you all know this being the practitioners that you are. We're in the phase of building training that builds cultural awareness. So how do we see ourselves as cultural agents? Then next, understanding the diversity awareness when it comes to terminology, toward the goal of having action plans. So what diversity inclusion training conversation looks like within a classroom setting is a little bit different when we get Fortune 500 companies. We're toward the goal of making sure that educators build a culturally inclusive classroom. So the conversations that we're having now is building toward that. We have one school that's our pilot school that we've been working on starting in the summer. So we'll be back with the next in-service day to do round 2, what that training looks like. So just understanding that what the system looks like within a K-12 system looks a little bit different than what we look like in other places. That's the key part of having Mr. Williams connected with his coordinator. There's already something else, I think, last family training, I think we knew about that the other day. Once that coordinator is in, then that's another piece on top of it. So, of course, you have the opportunity to give any feedback if you like, but we're trying to incorporate that within the agenda, which we try to do today.
And that's also part of the conference, that kind of also doing that. We interview with your some heads of department associations that you see.
Yes.
With ideas for next time, I know we mentioned several things last month, our meeting, and do we have those that we can bring up again? I know that the school choice was a big thing. And then we also spoke about hiring, I believe, human resources. I don't know if Dr. Pruitt is through her crunch time, if you will, that she would be able to come and give us her projections and view on diversity. And we didn't want to make it a special new rules edition of our committee, but when they're going to update the state with their hiring for the year, we wanted to be included on that, I believe.
So if you're talking about updating as it relates to diversity of staff, that's something that happens at the end of the year.
Staff and students.
That happens at the end of the year, so that it would be just the information that was prior to for the 18-19 year. Traditionally, how the committee has done it, you all have sat, I should say historically, the committee has sat and made a conversation connected to what presentations you'd like to see from the course of the year. I'm going to take an official vote to make sure that's the recommendation of it. Outside of that, then the chair or acting chair has conversations with the board liaison, and then they craft the agenda and report it out. So I've already heard one recommendation that you guys wanted to hear about the ESE, so that has not been something that's officially voted on, but I know last year, and this is a completely different committee, I have purview to how you like to see fit, but last year, you all took those conversations and then decided, here's what we would like to hear, here's some things that we're thinking about doing. So if you operate on precedent, the precedent was that's how it was last year, but of course, if you vote, you all have a purview after that. But it gives opportunity and time. The reason why Ms. Ralph is time sensitive, there are very few things that are in board policy that specifically state that we actually have a conversation in, and that first one was student enrollment. But we made the suggestion for non-discrimination policy, that was not part of the conversation, but with the consent of the chair, and also Ms. Jordan, who ultimately made the agenda, and you all have the opportunity to have that. So my conversation would be, and for those who were here last year, I know you all please chime in how you'd like to do it. But you all had a conversation and kind of workshop through some topic and some ideas, and that gives staff an opportunity to get that on the calendar of staff. And however you all decide to do it, it's up to you. But you all can take one meeting together.
So we are over on time right now, but if you want to discuss that now, we can, or we can add that to the agenda for next meeting to discuss.
Let's put it for the next meeting.
So
I have just one question of Board Member Jordan. Is there anything that the board would like us to look into from a diversity and equity standpoint?
No, I think we wanted to share the policy, and of course, we wanted to get feedback on that, which we did do that this evening, and we did get feedback. So it's, we feel it's important to make sure that we are sharing, so that, get in front of it versus people being upset that they did not know about it. So your recommendation is, greatly appreciated, and we'll go back. And then as things come up, we'll make sure that, if it has, to do with what we are, charged with doing, we'll make sure that everything is, shared.
Okay, thank you. And for the next meeting, school choice is still, or student assignment is still
Enrollment.
enrollment?
Thank you. Good one.
And does it work to have ESE along with that or not? I don't, from a staff perspective.
I think with student enrollment, I'll let Ms. Ralph jump in here. it's all, everything you do is gonna be connected to student enrollment.
Right.
But if you wanna keep it and keep the fidelity of the conversation, there were two things I heard, the recommendations of the conversation that you'd like to share with us about. And then the second part would be selecting individuals to serve on the waiver committee.
Right.
Those are the 2 points that I have. And then if you'd like to hear additional information about ESE, then I think that should be a standalone presentation.
Thank you.
Question, at what point are we having Dr. Atkins for the overall strategy, the vision? When do you have him?
That was a part of my special request to the superintendent from last year, just to have him come out. He is not currently scheduled on the agenda, but he did come last year.
You can come in the next meeting so that we lay out the background and all those things.
Yeah, you can check his
What
calendar.
would be the vision? I think it'd be a good thing for him to do the big picture. It'd be a good thing.
I like that.
And actually, that's what he's working on right now, all the strategic planning and where the board members are on each one of those plans. And what we've accomplished on that so far.
And if he is not ready, that's why he can come the Wednesday after, but if he is ready, like one of those next week, there's no big pressure about it. We need to see that, I think that should be in record, that the request that he comes to.
You can come.
I don't think there's any public here for public comment. Is there? Okay. All right, just a reminder, our next meeting is November 4th, so we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Good job, man, Michelle. One more. We're done. Hey, how are you planning to bring? And you come to the kid, right? Yes, let me just fix it.
I sit here and say, oh, the girl. I know, but, oh, you said
How you doing? You're welcome, no problem.
Oh, I just pulled out.
I don't know how
Yeah.
Exhausted.
I hear you. Say quick. I'm sorry I never called you back, but I started,